Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Week 8 first look. We're back to 12 games. The 10 games are over. Less teams on a bye. No Monday London games. As much as I kind of like those, like a little start earlier in the day, we're back to 12 games, which means easier to get different. Easier to find that one dude this week. Easier for players to become leverage plays as there's 4 more teams on the slate. There's way more ways for ownership to spread apart. It's just easier to get different, right? So let's take a first look position by position this week. And let's do it right now. All I ask is subscribe button. I appreciate that at any point during the video. If you decide, hey, I like this guy, I like what he's saying here, hit the subscribe button. We're dropping videos every single day during the week to help you with DFS, props, betting, all that type of stuff. So we'll start at the quarterback position, and there is something to point out. I've looked ahead at the totals for the 12-game main slate, not factoring in Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night. There's only one game where a total opened above 50 points, and just barely. 50.5 point total for Tampa Bay versus New Orleans. Other than that, there's only 2 other games above a 48 point total, at least where they opened. Lines can move. And those would be Tennessee versus Indy at just 49 and 49.5 Miami versus Buffalo. Miami versus Buffalo quietly looks like the best game environment since we saw Tua play really well last week against Atlanta, even in a loss. We saw him able to provide offense for multiple players on that team, and now they might get back Devontae Parker. We know what Buffalo can do on offense in a division matchup, so that's an interesting spot for GPPs when not a lot of games early on are looking like great stacking options. And another reason why is they've increased the prices. I mean, you get Josh Allen at $8,100. That's fine in GPPs, and cash probably not going to go there. But you start to look now, and I put a tweet out yesterday. 2021 NFL DFS is very easy these days. It is you stack either the Rams or the Bucks, so Matt Stafford or Tom Brady, and you collect. Well, now they're increasing the prices. Stafford is no longer in the 6K range. He's up to 7,600. They said enough with that. We're not letting that happen anymore as he gets a matchup against Houston. Tampa Bay, matchup against New Orleans. A tougher matchup with potentially a slower paced game, but Brady chasing all these records throws for 4 easy touchdowns, 3 to Mike Evans, 1 to Godwin. Might get back Gronk and Antonio Brown now. They said, hey, let's keep this guy's price continuing to rise, 7,400. Okay, so now we have to actually start to look here if we're trying to build some lineups. I think both those guys are firmly in play still, even at those price points, firmly in play for stacking. But let's see early on what we can find in terms of some value, right? You get Justin Herbert here at home against New England off of the bye. Fine spot. New England again, going to play a little bit slower, muck up the pace in that environment. Go down again, and look at this. Jalen Hurts at $7,200. Well, it's hard not to, I think, for like the 3rd video in a row, just hit Jalen Hurts' name and put him into this first look lineup because he continues to produce. Jalen Hurts has now scored 24 or more Draftkings points in 5 straight games, right? In 6 out of 7 games so far this season. And when you go back to look at what he did last year, right? He started 3 games last year. One of them, the final game of the year, they pulled him in a game where they were clearly tanking. So if you take that game out, complete starts, 7 of his 9 career starts, 78%, he's gone for at least 24 Draftkings points, right? His floor this year is 22 Draftkings points. He's now his highest price he's ever been at $7,200, but it's still a fair price point. And yeah, look who's on the docket. The Detroit Lions secondary that just got torched for yet another week by Matthew Stafford, their former quarterback, and a secondary that came into that week ranking dead last. It just gets better and better for Jalen Hurts. Maybe not in real life, but in fantasy as he goes for 60-plus rushing yards on the ground last week. So Hurts is just hard to not like. I mean, Joe Burrow's price point is up here. He's been throwing nicely. You get the 200-yard game out of Jamar Chase. T. Higgins doesn't fully come alive, but has another real-life decent game. But at $7,100, I don't want it. Russell Wilson, if he was to somehow miraculously return, he can't, though. He's on IR for at least another week, so that's not going to work here. Tannehill's in one of the game environments that actually look decent if you're looking at team totals. More of a GPP play, if anything, there, but we know in these closer games, and even in a game last week where they weren't expected to be up big, you get 29 attempts in a game where they walk away with it against Kansas City out of Derrick Henry. Jameis Winston, nice total. We'll see what happens as I'm recording this on Monday. He threw a season-high 30 times in Week 6 or Week 5 before their bye. Bye in Week 6. We'll see what happens now on Monday Night Football Week 7. Maybe that can be a spot if we get old Jameis at $6,000 against Tampa Bay. This is definitely a GPP-worthy spot with the highest implied team total starting, or the highest implied game total, one of the higher team totals for an underdog on the slate. This is a very interesting spot playing catch-up with Jameis, especially if they're able to get Michael Thomas back heading into Week 8. We'll see. They said he's a couple weeks away as of Week 6 when he would have to come off the PUP list. But now, maybe a couple weeks, we get some more news there. So Jameis is intriguing for GPPs. Matt Ryan's here at home. Carson Wentz has been having a couple of good games, a couple of 1-yard touchdowns on Sunday Night Football. You keep scrolling. Tua ended up having a great game. I mean, Tua was that one dude last week, and what does Tua go out there and do? For back-to-back games now, and really his only 2 starts since that slow-paced Week 1 game against New Orleans, you're getting back-to-back games of 40-plus attempts out of Tua. He just misses the 300-yard bonus, but he makes up for it for getting 4 passing touchdowns in this game. And look, the turnovers were there. 2 turnovers, but now you're getting Tua 25 and 28.5 fantasy points for a team that's going to have to continue to play from behind in what is arguably the actual best game environment on the slate, Miami versus Buffalo. Tougher matchup, though. Much tougher matchup, but you should expect Tua yet again to have to throw 40-plus times in this game. And if he's going to have to throw close to 40-plus times in this game, well, then you're probably going to get really nice situations for GPPs, maybe even your cash builds. More so GPPs for me, especially since there's some mobile upside, 25-plus rushing yards in each of the last 2 weeks. You might get Devontae Parker back, so then it's Gesicki, Waddle, Devontae Parker, and some options to choose from. So Tua is interesting. We'll keep Jalen Hurts in there for now. If we need a cheaper guy, we can go to him. Trevor Lawrence back on the slate. Geno at 5,300. If he can show that he can have some rushing yards tonight, maybe becomes viable. Probably not. Mac Jones had a really nice game. The rookie had his probably best game of the year fantasy-wise. Now gets the Chargers. Not much down here. I mean, we can look at Tyrod Taylor. There's a chance that Tyrod Taylor comes back. They were saying that they want to see what happens. There's a chance he's activated off of IR. If you're getting Tyrod Taylor at $4,900 to come back after how good he looked with mobile upside, a matchup against the Rams, going to play from behind at home. Yeah, I like Tyrod Taylor a good amount in all formats this week if he can indeed come back. I mean, that's a really nice value play to pay up for anything else that you want. But for quarterback right now, let's just stick to Jalen Hurts. And now we'll go back up to the running back position where we're going to have Christian McCaffrey still on IR here. But if we look at some of the other options outside of McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, price tag comes down, 29 attempts. Going to be a better game environment, if you will, for him. He had 2 receptions. We hit the under 3 on him. That was a really high number that Prize Pick set. Kamara plays tonight against Tampa Bay. Obviously, more so passing attack, even though the rookie Khalil Herbert just went for over 100 yards with nobody else good against them in a game where they get blown out. These are steep price points on these running backs. We're really going to need to find value this week. Quarterback position didn't offer much of that. And I assume now that we're already into week 8 that the wide receiver position won't offer much of that either. So the expensive guys are up there. You get Austin Eckler at 7,900, probably more of a GPP play. You get Najee Harris against Cleveland, and this matchup against Cleveland is not a great spot, but as we know, Najee Harris's opportunities are great. Najee Harris is on a short list for all formats this week. Jonathan Taylor continues to go for 100-plus yard bonuses. He's nice at $7,200. Finally, Swift is in the 7K range after having the nice big touchdown reception last game, and then not doing too much after that, to be honest with you. But he got us there in a lot of our Rams runbacks. You get Joe Mixon on here, which is Joe Mixon is not great. I mean, I put out a tweet. It's hard to rely on him unless he's low owned. And he was low owned last week, but the game environments that they're playing in, Samaje Perine was active last week. You went from Joe Mixon when Samaje Perine was out in week 6, seeing a season high 6 targets. And then in week 7, you see a season low 0 targets for him, right? So it's not great. It's obviously a week to week thing here, but the point is he's just not reliable. He's not this reliable 3 down back like some other guys are. Like some other guys, most notably. Also, Nick Chubb is 6,800. That's a great price point if he actually goes ahead and plays versus Pittsburgh. But some other guys who are actually full workhorse backs are James Robinson here at $6,600. Like, I'm going to probably just slide him almost blindly, just put James Robinson into my lineup here. So $6,600. James Robinson is like the 10th or 11th most expensive guy. And what we can do here is just look at the tweet that I put out. James Robinson in his last 4 games, right? They're coming off of the bye week, by the way. So if he was nicked up, even healthier. But his last 4 games, averaging 20.3 opportunities per game, right? Over 3.5 targets per game in those games. 22.5 Draftkings points per game. 22.5, right? For this price point, that means he should be close to an $8,000 player. And then you get a season high 92% of the snaps last week, 90+% of the snaps in 2 out of his last 3 games. Carlos Hyde has been barely factored in, and a season high 20 touches in his last game, week 5 before the bye week, or week 6 before the bye week. And now he's only $6,600 on DraftKings. So yeah, I'm going to be taking James Robinson here. I like that a good amount. We can keep going, and we don't even have to scroll that far. Yet again, the $6,000 range is where all this value lies. You get James Robinson and what we just said about his role. You get Leonard Fournette here, who has scored 17+ fantasy points on DraftKings in 4 straight games. Had another nice game, gets a matchup against New Orleans now, which will be tougher on the ground, but we know how much he's involved in the passing game. Cordell Patterson scores a touchdown again. Damian Harris with Ramondre Stevenson, healthy scratch, had a great matchup last week, took advantage of it. Tougher spot this week against the Chargers, but they will let you run. Tougher spot if you're talking about who's actually on that defense, but they will let you run as they play high 2-man shells. Chuba Hubbard will probably be a good GPP play because there's no still McCaffrey, and he let a lot of people down, and by a lot of people, just the ones who actually played him last week. Overall, he wasn't that highly owned. Daryl Henderson is on here. Like Henderson, how do you not play, at least on first look, right? The ownership will determine this, but last week I liked Henderson's unders, right? I still had a lot of him in DFS, like 20%. He was like my 4th, 5th highest on running back, but I ended up going, we'll put him into the lineup here as a nice price. I ended up taking his under rushing yards and his under total yards. I just thought the numbers were too high. We were able to hit on both of that, under 103.5 total yards, under 80.5 total rushing yards. We hit on those, right? And this week though, like, let's not just use 1 week samples, he's going to get just as good of a matchup against a bottom 3 defensive line last week in Detroit. And now he gets another bottom 3 defensive line in Houston, where they're going to be massive double-digit point favorites. And you're getting Daryl Henderson now seeing 21 opportunities last week, tying a season-high 6 targets that he saw in that game. And he's now had 17 or more opportunities, averaging 19.7 opportunities per game this year. He is, I believe, the 11th or 12th most expensive running back on the slate at just $6,500. That's really good. Now, we don't have much money left over, though. 49X, that's a decent amount. 4,950 is a decent amount. Let's just try and get a really cheap defense, and then we'll go to tight end. So as always, just scroll down to the cheapest defenses. Texans versus the Rams. That doesn't look great. Washington football team versus Denver. They still have a good defensive front. You saw them able to get to Aaron Rodgers last week. You see the Jets versus Cincy. Let's just go to Washington football team, right? $2,100. What does that leave us with now? It leaves us with $5,520 per position. Let's go to tight end because that's usually easier to fill, which gives us more of an idea of how much we can spend up, especially at wide receiver. We'll continue to look through running backs after we find a tight end too. So up here at the top, we get Kyle Pitts. It only took Kyle Pitts, 7-6, because they had the bye week. 6 career games to get to the highest expensive. A little bit of an asterisk with no Darren Waller and Travis Kelce on the slate, but the most expensive tight end on the slate. That's pretty interesting. TJ Hawkinson matchup against the Eagles and their linebackers is a good spot, but that price point's tough. Tough to get to that. I'd much rather have Kyle Pitts. George Kittle's still on IR, so you drop down, and very quickly, tight end is an easy paydown spot this week. The most expensive guy's only $6,300. With George Kittle on IR, you're already basically into the 4K range. Gesicki's on there, price point coming up. If Parker returns, I won't be as interested. A doubtful Dawson Knox, Rob Gronkowski status up in the air. I mean, it's kind of a wasteland towards this upper range. I do like Dallas Goedert in the matchup against Detroit. Dallas Goedert is nice if we can find the price point. Only 5 targets last week, but ended up still getting double-digit points. Ran more routes than we've been seeing out of him. You keep going down. The same thing continues to be true for Tyler Higbee. You just kind of put him in your Ram stacks. You don't really want him anywhere else, as he's going to be touchdown dependent, which helps your Ram stacks, and that's about it. Hunter Henry has scored in 4 straight weeks. Logan Thomas is eligible to come off of IR this week, so if Logan Thomas is eligible and he plays, expect him to get his full rollback. If not, Ricky Seals-Jones right there yet again continues to see volume. Now, it wasn't the touchdown last week, although he could have had one. He basically drops one, but still sees 7 targets, right? Catches 6 balls for 51 yards. Continues to be paying off these $3,000 price tags, so if there's no Logan Thomas, you can go right back to Ricky Seals-Jones as a top 4, top 5 tight end option, I assume, this week. Let's see if we can find anything cheap. CJ Uzomah has a double touchdown game, his second 2-touchdown game of the year. Now gets a matchup versus the Jets. I'm sure a lot of people run to that. And again, he had that big catch and run touchdown. He's playing fine, somewhat touchdown dependent on these big plays, but that's what you like to see out of cheap tight ends anyways. Jared Cook versus New England off the bye. Gerald Everett's on here. That's not that appealing. Let's see if there's anything value-wise. I mean, O.J. Howard will become a value if Rob Gronkowski was to miss again at 3K flat. Let's see if there's anything else. Hayden Hurst on here. Dan Arnold at $2,800 versus Seattle is a great spot, right? The newcomer to the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's been on this team now for about a month, but if you take away the game where he played on the short week when he joined the team on Thursday Night Football, if you take that week away and you look at what Dan Arnold has done in his last 2 games, in 2 full games with the Jacksonville Jaguars, he's ran 55 routes. 55 routes for a tight end in 2 games. He has 8 catches, 91 yards on 13 targets, and he's only $2,800. So he's a full-time tight end that you can rely on for 25 to 30 targets. He's basically playing like a very similar role, and we've seen that you've had multiple games this year, 3-4 games where tight ends, James O'Shaughnessy to start the year from Trevor Lawrence, have seen a lot of volume. You don't have DJ Shark. So now you get Dan Arnold at this price point of $2,800, and yeah, I like this. I mean, he's playing a similar role to guys like Jared Cook, who are how much? $3,400 Jared Cook? Yeah, he's playing a similar role on his team than Jared Cook is, than CJ Uzomah is. Ricky Seals-Jones has a pretty, really good role, I would say. Like Hunter Henry even has a similar role, just relying on touchdowns. So I think you're getting like $1,000 to $1,500 discount off of Dan Arnold, who's running similar routes and has similar touchdown upside, and we get a cheap price point on him. So if we put Dan Arnold in here, we have $6,200 left for 3 wide receiver spots in a flex. If you find just one value wide receiver, you're going to build a very good lineup here. Before we go to the wide receivers, though, I kind of want to finish up running back. We were kind of talking right around this 5K range. Antonio Gibson still battling the injury. Myles Gaskin kind of seems priced up for what he's doing. I know he scored the touchdown. Khalil Herbert's interesting. More of a GPP play matchup against San Francisco's defensive front, but Khalil Herbert goes out there and just casually puts up 100 yards, 133 total yards on 23 touches in a game where they get blown out. They only score 3 points, and he gets 23 touches for 133 total yards, 20-plus fantasy points for Khalil Herbert against Tampa Bay last week. Elijah Mitchell's on the slate, so there's some interesting GPP options here. You get Elijah Mitchell and Khalil Herbert. The running back one's on their team, as long as David Montgomery doesn't return for the Bears this week. That's good to see. And now you're kind of down to this same range of just guys who are splitting backfields. Miles Sanders did get banged up. He left that game early, by the way, in terms of injury news. So track Kenny Gainwell there, because if Miles Sanders was to miss, Kenny Gainwell versus Detroit, $5,000, that's almost a smash play, right? For a guy who should be coming into that game with all the passing game upside, probably sees himself on the ground close to double-digit carries. Mike Davis left that game early as well, only had 4 carries. We'll see if he has any concerns with injuries. Other than that, though, we're already pretty down into this lower 4K range. Nothing really stands out to me unless Rashad Penny has a massive role on Monday Night Football, which I'm not expecting. Malcolm Brown left their game early, so that would leave a little bit more on the bone for Salvon Ahmed and Myles Gaskin. But mainly looking here at probably in this range. I mean, David Montgomery, can he return from IR at $4,800 on here? That can't be right. Chicago plays David Montgomery on IR on the 10th. So technically for this game, there's a 3 to 5 week window on when they think he can return. So technically, David Montgomery, if he was to return this week, he's $4,800 and becomes a chalk of all chalk. Now, they said it's a 3 to 5 week window. This would be that 3 weeks. He's eligible to come off of IR. It's just a matter of is he actually healthy. I would lean that that's not going to be the case, but at least interesting to watch at $4,800. Track the Miles Sanders status for Kenny Gainwell, but you have some decent options down here. Khalil Herbert, Elijah Mitchell, the rookies who were undrafted / later round picks. Elijah Mitchell, I believe, a 6th round pick. So these are the guys who are actually showing out facing each other in that game. Running back actually seems to be nice this week. It looks like you have options in all formats, in all price ranges, I should say. So now we can finish it up with wide receiver. And before we get into the wide receivers, I'll let you know about the sponsor of the program. And we've talked about them a lot right now. A lot of people still not signed up, but a good amount of the community is and enjoying it. And that is going to be SuperDraft. So SuperDraft, what it is here, their main contest for the 12-game slate is not up. This is what they're showing on Monday Night Football. But what they have basically is a multiplier format. And here's the big thing for SuperDraft to know. Their main contests have like $200,000 in prizes, multiple formats. It's not salary cap based, it's just multiplier based. But the nice thing, first of all, if you use the code SAL, if you deposit 25, you get a free $25, just like that. $25 to play in these contests. But the big thing is that here's their entries, right? So this is for Monday Night Football. This is going to fill at about probably somewhere around 80%, 70%. So what does that mean? Well, if the contest fills at 70%, just by entering a lineup, you beat 30% of the field, right? They get zeros to the people who don't fill in there because it's a guaranteed prize pool. This does not happen on Draftkings or FanDuel. Why? Because they have billions of dollars in marketing budget and they ensure that their liquidity, meaning filling their contest, is 100% filled all the time. They know that because of how much they're marketing, they'll get people to fill the contest. SuperDraft is a smaller site. They've been around a couple of years, 1 or 2 years, but they're a smaller site. They're a boutique site, if you will. And fellas like me, I'm probably their biggest advertiser, if I had to guess, is pushing people there. So basically, whoever watches my videos knows about it and maybe some other spots. But that's about it. So you get the benefit from that knowing this right now. So if you get to beat 30% of the competition just by entering a lineup, that's where your first dollar should be going, or at least you should start to more actively go over there. The reason you're not playing on SuperDraft is 1, you don't know about it. 2, the DraftKings and FanDuel marketing has captured your attention and captured your mindset, right? That's fine. It's fun to play over there. They have bigger contests, but the best place to actually win money in place is when you're facing 30% less competition. A 1,000-person contest on DraftKings, you have to beat 999 people to win. On SuperDraft, you have to beat 699 people, right? It's just that simple. It's that easy. Go over there, try it out. Use the code SAL, free $25. Rooskies, any questions, let me know in the comments down below. So now we can finish it up with wide receivers. We have $6,200 per position to spend, so that's really cool. So wide receivers, Cooper Kupp, 9K range. He matches Devontae Adams, who's a $9,000 player a couple weeks ago. Hard to say I don't like it. Continues to see a 40% target share in these games. Continues to break the slates now like 5 out of 7 weeks. He's just unreal. I'll continue to like him. We had 45% last week. No reason to go away from him. We'll probably have a lot this week. You get almost $1,000 discount off of Steph Diggs versus Miami. We'll see some Xavier Howard, still a matchup that he can definitely win. Steph Diggs historically just crushes Miami. I think they faced him either week 2, I believe, after their loss to Pittsburgh. Found the end zone in that game. Fine, going back to Steph Diggs, you get Mike Williams overpriced. Terry McLaurin, good game against the Packers, 120 yards, almost had 2 touchdowns. He just dropped one, straight up drop, hit him in the helmet, dropped it. Jamar Chase off the 200-yard game is priced up. Deebo Samuel off of another game where 100-yard bonus hits the over 64.5 receiving yards for us and 67.5 as we double down on it. Just nobody out there seeing target share. Very similar to Cooper Kupp, just cheaper Deebo Samuel and less downfield usage and a worse offense that's not moving the ball as much and playing a little slower, but very similar to in terms of the target share. Those two guys are the top 2 target share players in the league, averaging 35+% target shares through these weeks. I see a lot of these guys I like. They're expensive though, so I want to see if we find some value. Mike Evans, 3 touchdown game, definitely in play. More so in play, even better if there's no Antonio Brown or Gronk. AJ Brown, 6,900 off of his massive game. DK Metcalf's on here. We'll see what he does on Monday Night Football. Dante Johnson, this is a great range. Look at this. Dante Johnson, Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen. You talk about target hogs, right? Cooper Kupp is peeking through, and Robert Woods in the bottom if there's no Antonio Brown. Godwin goes for a 100-yard game on 11 targets. Look great. But I like a lot of these guys right here in this range. I mean, Dante Johnson, let's throw him into the lineup. So let's just talk about Dante Johnson, right? So Dante Johnson this year so far, he's missed a game. He's averaging right now per player profiler 10 targets per game and a 29% target share, 19.1 DraftKings points per game, which is 8th in the NFL amongst receivers. And we get him so far this week at what, $6,700? More than fair for a guy who's not in the top 8, probably not even top 10 in pricing at the wide receiver position. We still have over $6,000 per player, just about to spend. What do I want to do in these cash type builds? Like this, we're trying to build a cash type lineup here, an optimal lineup, if you will, trying to secure the targets. Well, Dante Johnson's getting 10 targets per game right now, so I feel really good about that. Securing the targets and the volume, 21 opportunities per game out of Henderson, 20 plus opportunities per game in his last 4 out of Robinson. You're getting all the fantasy point security out of Jalen Hurts, right? Dan Arnold, at least at the tight end position, we're securing the routes and some targets. This feels good. Now, as we have $6,000 per player. Calvin Ridley's here at $6,600. I kind of want to click his name at home against Carolina. A nice matchup that he'll have since they don't have any J.C. Horn out there still. And I understand the concerns with Calvin Ridley. There's some major concerns here that his average depth of target is not as much, that Kyle Pitts is becoming the wide receiver 1, even though he's a tight end on this team. But if you just look at Calvin Ridley right now, right, he's still producing. It's not pretty, but he's not $7,500. He's not $8,000 Calvin Ridley. You have to factor in the price point. He's $6,600. How does he pay off for you? Well, if he scores 15 points, he doesn't kill you. If he scores 18 to 20, he's crushing for you at this price point. And over his last 4 games, so far, Calvin Ridley is averaging 11 targets per game. And over this time, what are you getting? You're getting basically 13 or more fantasy points per game. He's averaging a little bit over 15 fantasy points per game, and now he stays the same price at $6,600, even though he continues to get targets. Got nicked up a little bit in that last game. Ended up having a fumble in that last game. It was a bang-bang play, actually. They might have ended up calling it, let's see. Yeah, they called it an incompletion, but it was a bang-bang play. That would have been about another 20-yard gain here. So obviously, you don't like to see this. You don't like to see the fact that he's not going for 100 yards, that he seems to be struggling with Julio Jones not out there to take away attention. But maybe now as Kyle Pitts emerges, that attention starts to go away. For a guy, again, if you're talking about optimal builds here, is still seeing a lot of volume. And maybe he let people down last week with 12.6 fantasy points. Maybe they don't go back to him. I understand the concerns with it. Maybe people are starting to run away. I still think it's fine. Keenan Allen's on here, not seeing as much volume, but coming off of the bye week. A matchup for Cortland Sutton against Washington's secondary seems really good. At that price point, it's more of a GPP play, but I expect a lot of ownership to go to Calvin Ridley, to go to Dante Johnson, who's higher, to go to Godwin and Woods in this price range, and probably even Keenan Allen and Metcalf. So Sutton might be the odd man out in this range for GPPs. Looks really good. Keep scrolling down. How much money we have? We have $5,700 left over right now. Robert Woods, GPP option. Claypool's on here. Antonio Brown, if he comes back, fair prices. Now he's the cheapest Tampa Bay receiver, even though he's the wide receiver 1 on that team, right? So that looks good. Michael Thomas will track if he comes back this week. Brandon Cooks continues to see volume. Now you start to get some GPP options like Emmanuel Sanders, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle. Michael Pittman's on here. Low volume last week with no T.Y. Hilton in a bad weather game, but still hits 100 yards and a touchdown. We like to see that a whole lot. Keep scrolling down. T. Higgins is getting some volume. Landry and Cole Beasley. Beasley's a nice GPP option. I mean, that's a really cheap price point. $4,900 gets you a really expensive maybe stack with Josh Allen and Steph Diggs. Makes it work out. You run it back on the opposite side of that game at Miami with a cheaper Devontae Parker right here who missed last week. This is a great cheap stack. You can go Josh Allen, Cole Beasley, add Emmanuel Sanders or Steph Diggs, run it back with Devontae Parker. With Dawson Knox doubtful this week, Cole Beasley becomes even more of a priority in their offense in 3 wide receiver sets instead of Knox seeing a lot of slot usage like he has been the last couple of weeks. So I'm tempted to go to Cole Beasley at $4,900. This $4,900 price range is really, really juicy. You get Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy is expected to return from IR this week. Jerry Jeudy in week 1, I believe, if I remember the stats that I had on him, he ran 24 routes in week 1 and saw 7 targets, right? And then he gets hurt. And now this week he's only $4,900. This $4,900 price range, let's put Jeudy in there for now. If he's limited, we can take him out. But insert whoever one of these receivers you want. Jeudy or Cole Beasley here makes sense, especially with no Dawson Knox. Beasley becomes even more secure of a play. We have $6,600 to spend at our last guy. That feels really good. But let's see if there's a cheaper wide receiver to go to. It's giving us all the flexes. Let's go back to wide receiver now. $6,600 is a lot. I mean, you can kind of have whoever you want. We were in that 4K range. The $4,900 price range is strong. I mean, Landry, Cole Beasley, and Jeudy, very strong price range. You keep going down now. Robbie Anderson, will he ever pay off as the price point reduces? What has happened to Odell? He's been banged up, dealing with multiple injuries now. He's only $4,600, but can we even get there after how he's been producing lately? I mean, just a week removed from him going for 13 fantasy points, but man, oh man. Also, over 3 of his last 4 games, 5 or less fantasy points is a little bit rough. $4,700 Odell Beckham Jr. is an insane sight to see. Russell Gage had the deep touchdown and some usage, maybe GPPs. Van Jefferson still in the $3,000 range for your GPP builds with the Rams. Makes a lot of sense. Amon-Ra, 0 yards. The hype machine of the summer in New York. As always, we get New York overhyping players. Elijah Moore, only 1 catch. If Will Fuller was to return off IR, finally, $3,700 is nice. Jamal Agui's been involved in Jacksonville's offense. That's decent. Adam Humphries, if you want 3 catches for 30 yards, I don't. I mean, Brown got banged up last week. We'll see if he comes back. Not much down here. I mean, Kenny Stills, he plays on Monday Night Football. Going to depend, though, with Traquan Smith returning and maybe Michael Thomas if he's even going to be in the rotation. Not much down here. I mean, we don't have the cheap 3K guys. Like Van Jefferson stood out. A couple of guys that just look okay. Jamal Agnew, maybe Will Fuller. But yeah, I think I'm okay with where we're at currently at wide receiver. Just choose Cole Beasley or or Jerry Jeudy at the $4,900 range, depending on which guy you want there. But now we have $6,600 left over for a flex, and I'll just leave it up to you for who you want here. I mean, I'm fine with Keenan Allen. I'm fine with Godwin, especially if there's no Antonio Brown. I'm fine with Sutton. I'm fine with Robert Woods. I'm fine with Leonard Fournette, 17+ points in 4 straight games. All these guys look good. I really don't have a preference at this point. Antonio Brown is cheap, $6,100. You find yourself with a little extra money to pay up elsewhere. For right now, if there's no Antonio Brown, I would go Godwin here. Otherwise, it's really all these guys look good. Sutton and Keenan Allen both look fine here. I mean, you can throw Sutton into the flex spot. You can throw Leonard Fournette into the flex spot, right? At that point, you get the running back who's going to see probably 16 to 18 plus touches. Sutton has a little bit more upside there. I'm okay playing Sutton in the Washington defense. I don't think that's that big of a deal. Sutton can easily score 24 points, and the Washington defense can still score 8 to 10. It's not like they directly screw each other over unless Sutton's going for 50 points in his own right, which then I don't think we care if the defense gets 0. But yeah, I think this is interesting. You get $200 left over. Lots of options to obviously go within flex. I think that's a pretty interesting first look build. If you wanted to go to GPP type builds, I think you can just go Josh Allen, Cole Beasley, right? Run it back on the opposite side with a cheap Devontae Parker, add a Steph Diggs in there, and you're off to the races. Get one of those cheap but running back one productive players like Khalil Herbert or Elijah Mitchell, the rookies. You can keep Dan Arnold in there as a cheap tight end. You can keep a cheap defense, and Sutton you can put in there as a nice GPP, and you're starting to roll now. You're starting to roll with some cheap options. Jeudy at $4,900. So I think it's an interesting week. We have value in all the ranges at running back. We have value in all the ranges at tight end, and it's naturally cheaper with no expensive tight ends. Obviously, always punt defenses. And we have some nice value at wide receiver this week, especially in the more so the 4K range, in the low 5K range than the 3K range. But that's still fine if you build a nice balanced lineup. So week 8 DFS looks like it's going to be fun. It looks way better than the last 2 weeks in terms of what the first looks look like. Not that many options. You're playing these terrible players, but it's fun. We're getting some nice players back now. Maybe Michael Thomas returns. Maybe David Montgomery returns. Jerry Jeudy's expected to return. Like, this is fun, getting some new players in there. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure, subscribe button, like button, and the big one here is the subscribe button. I appreciate you tuning in. Let me know in the comments down below, who's the first look player that you saw and you're like, yeah, I got to play that guy this week. That's definitely where I'm going this week. Let me know that. I'm curious your thoughts on that, and be sure to support the sponsor of the show, SuperDraft. Your first $1 should be going in on SuperDraft this week. You get a free 25 if you use the code SAL, so 25 match right back to 25, and the contests just don't fail. You have a 30 to 40 to 50, depending on how much of the contest doesn't fail, % higher chance at actually placing and winning money over there. So just start to think about that more and start to get gravitated away from the marketing pull of DraftKings and FanDuel. Still good to play over there. I play over there a ton. But diversify the bankroll and choose contest selection, the most important thing in DFS, and take advantage of that. Thank you, everybody. We'll have videos every single day this week. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.